in God. Which means that work is more than a job. That's our next point. Work is all through Genesis chapters 1 and 2. All through it. For 6 days, God works. And then at the beginning of chapter 2, it says God rested from his work. We'll talk about that next week. But then we're told right in the middle of Genesis 2 in verse 15, the Lord God took the man, put him into the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. Now, as an American, I generally think of work as, the synonym for work is job, right? Whatever I do in order to earn a paycheck, that's my work. But I think that's actually a harmful correlation. Let me build this out for you. It's a harmful correlation because it changes the understanding of work from a transformative production to a transactional cause and effects. If it's all about whether or not I get paid to do it, and that's what defines whether or not I'm working or not, and I merely work in order to get pay, I think that's a dangerous causational relationship. And so because of this false correlation between work and pay, we often think of things like homemaking or volunteering as pursuits that are somehow inferior to real work. Because they don't have a paycheck, right? Oh, I have to go do my real job now, we often hear people say. As though serving people and helping them thrive isn't real work. The whole idea of a job also brings about this belief that our identity and status are conferred to us by our paid employment. Don't you see that all around our society today? Our identity is tied up in what you do. Go anywhere where a bunch of men gather, and the first question people are going to ask when they don't know each other is, and what do you do? Somehow our labels about what we do become our identity. And if you don't think that's true, just think about the emotions that you have in you if I were to utter the words blue collar or white collar. And it doesn't matter which side of that you fall yourself, you have opinions about the opposite viewpoints, about those jobs and those statuses. I mean, just think about the different reactions that you would have if you were introduced to somebody who was a Fortune 500 CEO, as opposed to the temp that works in their company. You would have a different reaction because we believe that our identity is conferred on us by our jobs. And so therefore, a lot of people, and this happens especially with young people, feel pressured to find their dream job so they can make a difference in this world, they say. And that's not a wrong idea to make a difference in the world, but it's a wrong direction of focus. Because then the whole effort becomes trying to leverage our work into experiences that also provide us with better pay raises so that we can grow our career before we settle down. And that attitude betrays the fact that we've bought into the lie that our employment, or lack thereof, determines who we are as a person. So that our employment had better be ideal so that I can experience the best identity possible. And that perspective then can leave us jaded and prideful, depending on our relative success in it. But our true identity, as we saw last week, our foundational identity is found in this: let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion. So God created man in his own image. This is the foundation of who you are, not something else, not what you do. God sees this in you and sees how it will work its way out in you, his own identity. And the declaration in verse 31 then is, it was very good. That's God's declaration about all that he created, including the image of God in you. Everything that God makes is very good. And to have been created, to have dominion over the whole earth was very good. And so therefore, work as the outworking of mankind's good identity is good. And God says, live out your identity, direct the affairs of creation, enjoy the fruits of your labor. Literally, look at verse 16 of chapter 2. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, you may surely eat of every tree of the garden. That's living on the fruits of your labor. That's a good thing. The best way to sustain yourself is to bring about fruit from your labor. There's nothing wrong with flourishing. That's what that's telling us. There's nothing wrong with successful work. It's good. That's what we're supposed to enjoy. And that's how it's supposed to be. But of course, we know that's not always how it is, right? Because even though we have dominion over the earth, God sovereignly places limits on that dominion. Look at verse 17, the very next verse. But of the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in that day that you eat it, you shall surely die. Adam, you're going to have dominion. Here's the limits of your dominion. You can't do everything you want to do. There are some things I'm just not going to allow you to do. And that becomes the source of the temptation in the garden. That's the jar, isn't it? Genesis 3, verses 4 and 5. But the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God. Oh, what a temptation. Humanity took what was good and decided it wasn't enough to be just in the image of God. It wasn't enough to be a part of a very good creation. It wasn't enough to just flourish. We needed to have more. And so we believed a lie and we decided that God hadn't made us good enough. Somehow he was keeping something from us. And this is where our work gets perverted. Work, all of our work, becomes about getting something for ourselves, getting glory for ourselves. You see, we were never meant to flourish for our sake. We were meant to benefit from flourishing, but that wasn't the end game for us. We were to flourish to bring life so that God could be displayed in the world as the bringer of life, not to be gods in the world in our own right. And then because of this is why our work becomes laborious. It becomes toil. After Adam and Eve's rebellion, God pronounces curses on them and on the land. Verse 17. Excuse me, that should say Genesis 3 on the screen. That's my fault. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall, it's actually chapter 4, sorry. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. You see, not only is man in a fallen state, but now the ground is cursed as well. Work now has the possibility of being fruitless, pointless, selfish, idolatrous. Work now can become the means and the end of our entire life. It becomes the purpose and the prize all at once. And this is seen actually in one of the very early stories in the Bible. In Genesis chapter 11, the people say, hey, you know what? We're starting to become a big deal. But here's the problem. If we keep being successful, we might spread out and we might lose contact with each other. So let's do this instead. Let's come all together and let's make bricks. Do you see the industriousness of humanity? Let's make bricks. We don't have to use stone. We can make it all out of our own materials, which is what God intended for us to do. But they did it for a very poor purpose. And let's make a tower. Let's make a name for ourselves so that when everybody sees this tower, they go, who built this? Wow, they're great. But what had God commanded them in the garden? Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. You see, they were doing the opposite of what God's purpose was for them. Now the people are rejecting God, they're staying close together, and they're making a name for themselves, not glorifying his name. And what happens? God forces his mandate on them. He confuses their language, and then he scatters them across the face of the earth. Why? Because our identity was never meant to come from ourselves. We were meant to reflect God to the creation. But here's the principle. If we work to make a name for ourselves, it will only sow division and strife because we aren't reflecting the one that we're supposed to reflect. So if you forget where your identity is and where it's established and who established it, you'll say, no. Work is really a way for me to get a name for myself, a way for me to raise my family up in society, in the eyes of society. And what's going to happen ultimately is that you'll have a cynical attitude toward work because work is about me. Work isn't a good in and of itself. Its only good is to make me look good. And so then you're just going to take jobs that make you money. Maybe they make you more money, and so you take it. And you're only going to do a good job if there's a way in making more and getting more from it. That's a cynical view of work. Understand, because of sin, it may not be easy to do other-centric work anymore. I get it. Sometimes you have to go out and you have to get a job just to support your family. I got to pay bills. I don't love what I'm doing, but I got to pay the bills. And I get that. That's part of the curse. Work involves toil now. But then you need to recognize that that's not your garden then. If it is just to get myself through, you're not in a garden at that point. So where is your garden? Your garden is your family. Your garden is your neighbors. Your garden is the community that you're investing yourself in.